Over 170 years ago, Henry David Thoreau observed, "The mass of men lead lives of quiet desperation." Is this you? Do you feel trapped in the rat race we call life? Are you truly the person you desire to be? Are you unhappy with where you find yourself physically, mentally, or spiritually? Let's make the life changes necessary to empower you with happiness and contentment, belief and confidence in yourself. Join the discussion with countless other people who want nothing more than to be the best version of themselves that they can be. Welcome to Better with Jimmy Blackman. Hey, Coach, how are you?
Doing all right. Good to see you again.
Good to see you. Looks pretty up there. Weather good in Michigan?
It's this is about the only time of year I like it. When you got an outside job, I'm gonna take this right here. So
yeah, spring training can be chilly.
Chilly's an understatement. It can be cold. It was darn right cold.
I bet. How's life as grandpa?
It's been it's awesome. I never, everybody used to say, wait till you're a grandparent. I'd be like, yeah, right, whatever. But it's different. It is. I don't even like my kids anymore. I just like my grandbaby. So
I told my wife, and it's funny because I said the hardest thing to do is watch your kids parent. So as I observe it, all I get from my wife is keep your mouth shut. Keep your mouth shut. Be quiet. Don't say what you're thinking.
You know what though? I'm actually. It's been fun to watch, and Jamie and I were just talking about this. Like Ty, our middle one, and Nikki, his wife. They're awesome, and we're admiring honestly how good of parents they are. And my son Ty is a sports agent, and it's just nonstop for him. But the balance and taking him to the park, and still doing his work, it's really really cool to see. So I'm proud of how he's operating. But he can dump old Maverick on us anytime he wants.
Absolutely, it's you did all right as a parent then. You look around and go, I did okay.
Well, yeah, I think so. Yeah. We'll see. Hey, to be determined. Right?
Yeah. Now, where do they live?
They're in Arizona, Ahwatukee, Phoenix area, and of course, when I took the job out there, all the Midwest people in my life moved out that way, and then of course now I'm back here in Ann Arbor at University of Michigan, so they all stayed.
Yeah,
and here we are.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's where you and I got to spend so much time together. Of course, my daughter and two grandkids are there as well.
Yeah.
My youngest daughter is about to get married out there as well. So
nice.
I don't know. I've got two daughters that may wind up there, and my grandkids. So I don't know. I always said I've been to Kuwait. I'll never live in Phoenix. I've been to Kuwait, but who knows?
Yeah. No. For me, any reason that we kept our stuff, so we kind of figure at whatever time that is, or the time in Ann Arbor's done, I think I know where we're going to be.
Right.
So,
well, let's talk baseball for a few minutes. Tell me about growing up and getting into the sport.
Well, it's funny. I just look at even like and I don't want to be one of those guys. Hey, back in my day, we used to, but it's a little bit of that. I grew up in a small Midwestern town. Honestly, it was super small, 1,800 people. And baseball for me really evolved in just probably like sports for people our age, us youngsters, just in the backyard, playing. I remember vivid memories. My dad playing catch, and he had a wicked knuckleball, but I had my sister and two brothers, and we constantly were in the backyard playing. What's that movie? Gosh darn it,
Sandlot.
The great baseball movie. Yeah, Sandlot. So it literally was that. Like we would meet in an open lot, all the kids in the town, and we would play lob pitch baseball. And so, this is where I'm going to say that I'm probably act like that old guy, but I don't see that anymore. Like you could drive around, you see kids, we would play out in an open lot. And so the love grew from there, but it was more organic. There was no master plan of being a coach or a big leaguer or anything like that. It just played because it was fun to play.
Let me ask you this, because this comes up all the time. You hear this debate of, kids growing up, specializing so much, and people say, back in my day, I was a three-sport kid. Everybody played baseball, basketball, and football. Is that truly possible to make it to your level if a kid does that today?
Yes,
It
it
is.
is. In fact, yeah. In fact, we have. Um, I love it because we got some multi-sport kids now. Michigan football is pretty darn good. Michigan baseball is pretty darn good, but we've got two kids on our team right now that play both.
Hmm.
They're on the football team and for us. So I think even growing up, what bothers me is people drink the Kool-Aid of the specialization. And I remember when I was in Bloomington coaching in Indiana, and I'm standing there with Tom Crean, who was the basketball coach at Indiana at the time, because we hear it on the other side. Like parents will come to us in the recruiting process and say, "Yeah, we hear you only want someone who specializes," and I'm like, "No, because I want that transition or the translation of the skill set, and your body needs a break, and all of the things that go with it." So I'm standing there with Tom Crean. We're watching football practice, and we're kind of talking about this very subject. And I said, "Look, I love multi-sport athletes. What about you?" And here's someone again who's coaching at one of the top basketball programs on the planet. And he's like, "Yeah." He goes, "I love it." So we were both just commenting about how it just drives us nuts that people kind of switch the narrative. And I will say this, Jimmy, every single coach that I've talked to, there's not one that I've talked to in my career that says, "Yeah, I love the focus on one." Not one coach.
Hmm. Interesting.
So, yeah.
So how did it develop for you from that backyard up to the big leagues?
Well, first of all, from Indiana, you know, you got to love basketball. So I always thought I fancied myself as a basketball player, and I know you like to keep fit too. So I ran as a hobby, but baseball was it was just something that I did because it was fun, and I'm going to go back and forth between that time and now. When you see a lot of youth sports now, there's an end game, a mission. Everyone's pursuing the Division I scholarship or professional baseball. But I can honestly tell you that wasn't something for me. So I thought I was going to be a college basketball player. Never really thought about baseball, but just played and played it because I loved it. And then July of my senior year, I participated in an Indiana baseball all-star game, and coach saw me from Miami of Ohio. And I think about that in today's terms. Kids are committing freshman, sophomore year to schools. This is July of my senior year. So I choose to go down to Miami of Ohio, and because I love the school, I loved just the environment. I don't know. Have you spent any time on that campus? Gorgeous
I have
campus.
not.
It's truly one of the nicest ever. But that's how it happened. I mean, I just kind of it just it,
That's
again
incredible.
very organic. And
Yeah.
so started my freshman year on a team, which is hard to do, but got beat out my sophomore year. A guy named Tim Naring came in, beat me out. He ended up being the Boston Red Sox shortstop for a while, so he deserved it.
So you were a middle infielder.
I was a middle infielder, but I had pitched in high school, but I didn't. What do they say? The greatest motivator in the world is the bench. So I didn't want to sit on the bench. So I go to my coach. I said, "Hey, I want to help the team win. Can I pitch?" And I don't say this in a derogatory fashion, but there's something he said to me, which I weave into my recruiting conversations now when I'm talking to kids. But he said to me at the time, he goes, "You can't pitch. I've seen you pitch." And I'm thinking, okay, so the answer to that was no, you can't. So I took it upon myself that year to throw and train after practice, and I would throw to our hitters after practice. And I did that for an entire year. Coming back my junior year, I was determined not to sit on the bench. And so finally worked my way in, and one of my college teammates kind of helped advocate for me. But here's comes a full circle story. So my first start, so now I'm pitching. I'm not playing position anymore. Still hadn't let me pitch yet. Still let me pitch. We're on a spring break in McAllen, Texas. And we're getting ready to play University of Michigan with Barry that we were number 5 in the country at that time. Jim Abbott, the one-armed pitcher. So now he gives me the ball as my first college start against Michigan at that time. I ended up losing, but had him down. But that's kind of how it all started. And again, the moral of the story for me was, and even as I become a coach, I don't want to put limits on kids. You know what I mean? Like, because that stuck with me that, hey, I've seen you pitch, implying you can't do it, when I'm like, you know what, I think I can. And so I was drafted as a pitcher by the Chicago Cubs out of Miami my junior year, and I'm out. And again, this is what's different now. Like, I had no idea going into the draft whether I was going to be drafted or not. There's no communication, and draft back then was unlimited rounds, because today there's so much information. Kids know what round they're going to be drafted in. So I'm out in New York playing college summer ball, and say, hey man, you were drafted yesterday. I was like, oh really? It's like, okay, cool.
Where am I going?
Yeah. Well, so again, my town was Kentland, Indiana, just south of Chicago. So you're either a Cubs fan or a White Sox fan. So I'm a lifelong Cubs fan. So I get drafted, and I'm excited, but and thought I would negotiate a little bit. So they're going to come out and see me pitch one more time before giving kind of an offer. Well, like 2 days before they come, I get in an automobile accident, a really bad one, when actually I shouldn't even be here to this day. So it's funny how life changes. And I think that leads to eventually what happened. So, I mean, I thought my career was over. Certainly the draft and professional opportunities were over. But I'll just fast forward a long, track back. Senior year, I go back to college because I didn't have the pro option at that time, but got drafted again the next year by the Cubs. So that journey began in spring training of 88. 88. And again, not knowing, not wanting, not whatever. Hey man, I want to be a pro. It just kind of happened. Just kind of ignorant to the whole process.
Yeah, today. I mean, we went when my son played baseball, as you know, in high school, and we went over to the University of Tennessee, and when we went through, they walked us through the facility, showed us everything, and the coach said, "Yeah, we've committed 2 8th graders, kids that are in 8th grade." I mean, and so you're right. The plan from the time a kid's 13 years old. I mean. Yeah. I guess there's some good somewhere in that. There's also a lot of negative along the way there as well.
Well, and I tell families, because they're always, well, this is so when we get back to the dual sport thing, say a kid commits to me in our school, whether it been in Miami, Indiana, ASU, or here, they're like, well, coach, now I'm gonna quit the other sports so I can focus on baseball. I'm like, no, don't do that. Don't do that. Keep doing what you're doing, because that got you to where you are.
I wanted what I saw right here.
Right. Well, and go enjoy being a high school senior, or high school junior, whatever year they're in. Like, enjoy that, because you don't get that time back, as we know.
Yeah, no, absolutely not. And it's, the funny thing though, is that mental side, that mentality of, the coach told you can't pitch, and inside you were like, well, now I want to pitch really bad.
Exactly.
And there are kids that it would just have devastated them. They would have been like, well, I guess I'm done or whatever. That I got a friend of mine who several years ago, he was up at the University of Kentucky, and he was actually consulting, but the problem they had, this is probably, I'm dating it probably 10 years ago. University of Texas was interested in the same thing. And what they were, according to all the metrics that they were evaluating athletes, and this was on the football side to start with, what really got them, and I think women's volleyball. But anyway, the number one kid, the 5-star kid, didn't make it. And so they're giving all the scholarship money to a lot of kids that didn't wind up staying very long, whereas some of these other kids. So they asked the question, which kids should we be looking for that we're going to get the greatest return on investment in? And so they came up with all types of aptitude testing, skill testing, and they were really looking at personality and the drive within. And some of these kids, they were then saying, okay, he's number 4 or 5. Yeah, that's your number one guy. That's the kid that'll be here senior year for you, producing.
Yeah. Well, it's funny you talk about that, because everyone's trying to solve that equation, because we spend so much time in not just baseball, but the sport world in general, football, and the physical. But if you go back and you look at, and I know like us, our losses, it's like, and I'm joking around a little bit here, but gosh, that was a stupid play, or what are they thinking on that? Just stuff like that, where it's not the physical, it's all the separators up here. And the fact that we are, and I think there's more investment in that now. I think people are starting to figure that out, but it's just surprised me the lack of time we spend developing the mind, when it's generally the mind that's the biggest separator in terms of failure and success.
Yeah.
Competitively.
You watch the NCAA basketball, championship, and shooting a free throw when it's win or lose is nothing physical. They can shoot free throws all day long, but when you have to shoot a free throw to win, wow, that's a different game.
Nope, totally.
So, I had a question for you later on, but since we're on that subject, obviously every kid goes through these periods where they're in a slump, be it, hitting, pitching, can't hit the strike zone, fielding, whatever it is. How do you kind of approach that philosophically?
Well, first of all, we don't like to use the word slump.
Okay.
No, I mean, because that puts the negative, but we try to get the athlete focused on the process, because baseball's one of the craziest sports, because you can do everything right. You can have sound mechanics, do everything right, hit a missile, let's say from an offensive standpoint, hit a missile, 100 and some miles an hour off the bat, whatever, but yet still have a negative result, which goes down to that over, which contributes to that word that you said, that slump word. So you could be actually hitting the ball really, really well, but not having a positive result. So we get them to focus on the process. Same thing on the pitching side. You can execute a perfect pitch, and just because the guy, a freak goes down and hits that ankle ball or the strikeout pitch over for a home run. So what we try to do again is focus on the process and try to, repeat the positive, what you can control, which is your technique, your mindset, everything, over and over again, and stay right here. Is it a challenge? Yes, it's a challenge, because we're dealing with youngsters who are results driven. And so I get it, but that's what we try to do, is focus on the process.
Interesting, because that is an archery thing. Of course, I shoot competitive archery and have for years. And if you go to South Korea, when they're teaching kids, the first year that they're teaching them, they don't get to shoot at a target. It's a blank bail. All they focus on is the shot process, because it's control what you control. Like that'll take care of itself. All you own is executing the shot process. Master that, and that'll take care of itself. How many American kids do you think would shoot at a blank bail for a year?
They wouldn't shoot at it for 10 minutes.
No. No. They absolutely. And in fact, one of the biggest problems we have with them is called peaking. And that is the arrow hasn't even left the bow, and they're looking to see, what was the score? Was that a 10? It was results oriented. What's the score? Define victory.
I want you to watch that now. And even so, they have radar gun readings of baseball games now, and it's on the board. And again, that wasn't a thing when I was playing. And here I go back to back in my day. But now if you watch a guy, he throws a fastball, what's the first thing he does? He turns and looks at the board.
Wants to know what it was.
And so we hear, even in the process of recruiting, we hear it all the time. Coach, I throw 93. And my thing is, well, that's great, but do you get anybody out? Because that's the real result, is, do you get anybody out? Do you win those individual battles within a game? So, yeah, I think a lot of these metrics and the celebration of that, it's kind of, I say we lose a little bit of that competition factor that's why we play whatever we play anyway. You win and you lose.
Yeah. George Hincapie's son this last week just won another, at 14 years old, his second national championship in bike racing. And I saw George in an interview talking about him, and he won't let him train with a power meter. He's like, I want him to race by feel. I just want you to race with your heart. Get out there and compete. I don't want you chasing a number. Just go race.
Well, it's funny how how that stuff translates from sport to sport. Yeah. We had a prospect camp here. This was last summer, and a young kid was like throwing well, and I'm like, gosh, that looks good. His mechanics were saying he was competing, and I went up to him after, because now all kids have a pitching coach, a running coach, I think going to a bathroom coach. Like, they've got every coach for everything. So I said, hey man, who do you work with? He goes, Coach, I've never had I've never worked with anybody. I said, perfect. Keep it that way, because you are on track, son. You're competing. Don't forget that.
Awesome. So. Well, playing and coaching, two different skill sets. We've seen great players that tried to coach and it didn't work out so well. And we've seen folks that never really made it playing that were great coaches. Where did you start to think about coaching and making that transition? How did that work out?
Much like my playing career, I never really thought about it. So I was playing, and my son Casey. And it was funny. Jamie was pregnant with Casey in the spring training of '91 with the Cubs. And you talk about different times. She's going to have him during spring training. So I go to the Cubs and I said, hey, my wife's getting ready to have a baby. Can I go back for the birth of my son, my child? They said, you go home, you stay home. So they did not let me. Yeah, they did not let me go back. So I was college educated. When I went back for my senior year at Miami, I already had my degree in my pocket, all of that stuff. So I'll never forget this. So I'm in full Cubs uniform. We're out stretching the outfield. I'm in Mesa, Arizona, where our spring training complex was. I'm stretching the outfield. And I look over at my buddy, Derek Stroud, and I said, Derek, today's a good day to hang it up. And he's like, you're not going to. I said, yeah. So I stood up, walked over, grabbed my manager and said, hey, man, I'm gonna shut it down. And so we talked to the farm director, and they said to me at the time, hey man, you can play for 10 more years, but we don't see it, big league, blah, blah, blah. And I said, well, I'm making the right decision. Like, I didn't get in this just to tool around. Now at that time I didn't know that I was going to coach, but it was like, and again, I think the psychology of not being allowed to see your child born, all of that played into it. But I went back, started my master's degree. And my father-in-law at the time was the AD at a small branch campus called Miami University of Middletown. And I started coaching basketball, going back to the basketball thing again. And I loved coaching basketball, but we fired up the baseball program again. And so I started that. That's how I started. Was just honestly out of, not necessity is the wrong, but just, hey, yeah, oh, you want to start a baseball program? Sure. But I didn't know what I was doing. I mean, I was mid-20s at the time. So I'm coaching. Here I am coaching guys that are 2 and 3 years younger than me. And,
right.
And funny, I just went back to Hall of Fame, inducted in that Hall of Fame recently. Some of the athletes came back, and in my mind, I was like, hey man, what are you doing now? And they're retired, some of them. And I'm like, how old are you? And they're like, I'm 55. I'm like, wait a minute, I'm 57. Was I coaching you? Like, it just didn't seem like that. But that's kind of how it all started. I mean, it was just, again, organic. And I'm a big keep both feet in today person. So it wasn't like, hey man, I want to do this, to do this, to do this. And a funny story, Jim, and I talk too much, but I remember when I was coaching at Miami, Ohio, and I'm standing there. You're probably 3 or 4 in, and we got to roll a little bit. And I'm standing before a football game, big recruiting event. And I'm standing talking to a parent and a kid, the parents and the kid. And an old Miami teammate of mine comes up to me. It's like, Tracy, you're coaching? You're the last person I would ever thought would coach. I'm like, dude, not in front of the parents, man. So again, I mean, it just kind of just happened.
Awesome. Well, how did that lead to Indiana?
So I was coaching the small school, and my coach who I played for, John Pavlisco, the one, I'd already shared that. He said, I just said to him one day, I said, hey, if you ever have a spot on your staff, which was Division I, I said, I would love to do it. Well, he called me the next year, had one. And so I was forever grateful. Assistant coach for 2 years with him. Took it's kind of a funny story too. So I'm on a recruiting call one night, and we're recruiting a kid that Indiana was recruiting. Now I'm an assistant at the time. I had heard that his assistant had just taken another job through this recruit. So the recruit tells me, he's like, well, coach, I don't think I'm going to go to Indiana because the assistant just left. So I call up the head coach at Indiana. I leave a message on his machine. I say, hey, Coach Morgan, I'm calling because I heard such and such just left, and I'd be interested in your pitching job or your pitching coach job. Well, Coach Morgan didn't know his assistant was leaving. so
this recruit has opened everything up.
Well, so that guy didn't stick around there very long. So he left, and then so I went there for 2 years, went back to Miami as a head coach for 9 years. And then when that job opened up back in Indiana, I took it. Now, the interesting part about this, I think, as it relates to just life, they were last place multiple years in a row. And I remember as I was contemplating leaving Miami, where we had just built everything, we were winning championships, producing high round picks, to Indiana, which was, we had just built a stadium at Miami. Indiana was a glorified high school field. They're finishing last place. Everybody in the profession, every one of my colleagues, from pro scouts to coaches, said, don't take that job. You can't win there.
Wow.
I had one coach, a guy named Bob Todd, who was at Ohio State at the time, said, Tracy, take that job. That's a diamond in the rough. And so, went against everybody's conventional wisdom, because I wanted to challenge myself, and we took it, and of course, had some good success there and built it. So,
well, you made a name for yourself there. I mean, is that really where, you became a household name?
Good players make you a good coach. I had the good fortune of coaching, honestly, some really good players, and the most notable one that people talk about now, Schwarber, and what he's done. Everybody's like, yeah, Schwarber got you the ASU job. And I'm like, yeah. So next, yeah.
You built that team, right? They wanted to come play for you.
Well, yeah.
When you start somewhere, you say you're going to go turn a program around. Well, you've got to convince players to come be a part of the program to get there.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a collective, and that. You've been a part of teams. Your team was bigger and better than my team. But yeah, it's the same thing. It's people, it's relationships, and getting people to buy in and be the best version of themselves. And I'd like to think that I had a hand in that as the head coach, but at the end of the day, kids got to do it. But yeah, Indiana was a lot of good memories there, and I'm, of course, born and bred in Indiana, so that was fun.
Absolutely. Well, and that's, I think I know the answer to this, but you and I are much alike in that I get great satisfaction out of helping people do just that, be the best version of themselves. I love it when the light comes on, they do something they didn't know they could do, or they go to that next level. And that's very gratifying and rewarding to me. And so I know, as a coach, is that the fuel in the tank?
Well, it sounds crazy, and and guys that have played for me, I think they would certainly understand this. I take great responsibility in holding people accountable and setting a higher limit than they think that they have in themselves, because I think that's what we do. Now, is that motivation? Is it physical challenges every day? We go back to the mind. The mind's a pretty powerful thing. It wants to limit you all the time. I think, the job of a leader, a coach, and what you did, certainly in your military background, and even now, is getting people out of that comfort zone and take that limit off, and let's really see how far you can go. So that's really been the backbone of what I've tried to do at every single stop. Now, do the kids understand it at the time that you're doing it? Probably not. But I can go back now, and literally, I did this after the ASU situation. I went back and just collected everything that was laying all over and got it organized finally, because I had a year to do it. But I've literally got a stack of emails and letters and whatever of kids that go on now, and they run their own business, or they have a family now, or whatever, of, hey, I understand now what you were trying to do or what you did. And so that's the best part for me.
Awesome. It's we self-limit so much. And again, we've hit on Americans, like I said, not process-oriented, more results-oriented. I want to know what the score is to find victory, all these things. And I can't think of another podcast I would have the opportunity to tell this story. So since we're storytelling, I was trying to qualify for the 2000 Olympic trials and the marathon. And I was down in Austin running the Motorola Marathon back then, and I was an invited athlete, and so they had all the invited athletes together, and they had these Kenyans that were going to be pacers, and they were just going to hit perfect pace for guys to qualify for the trials. And there was this young Kenyan guy, and he was this big toothy grin, all the time, just happy all the time, humble little kid. And so I remember beforehand, John Conley was the race director. And beforehand, he asked him, he goes, well, what if I'm having a really good day and I want to go the whole way? And he said, well, just take your pace number off, and that'll let everybody know I'm in the game now. Yeah. Okay, so he takes off, and we hit the pace, and he gets through his duties. I don't remember how far he had to go, but sure enough, he takes his number off, and he just takes off. I mean, just launches, you know. And there was a guy there who made the Olympic team. I think he made the team that year, but Jimmy Harrell ran 2:11 that day. He had a great marathon, and I mean, he's like catching Jimmy. This dude's just hammering. And I get to like mile 22, 23, and I see this guy coming back to me, and I'm catching him. And this dude's like weaving. And it was him. And when I went by him, he didn't know what country he was in. I mean, he was done.
Spin
He
his
was
tank.
toast. Right. So afterwards, I was talking to him, and it was interesting to hear him talk. He was not negative, not disappointed at all. I said, "You look pretty rough." He goes, "Yes." He goes, "I made 22 miles at my pace. Next time I go 23." And to him, we've got a heart rate monitor. We've got a watch that tells us what pace we can run. Oh, if I go over that, I might blow up or whatever. He was just running as hard as he could, as long as he could. And he was like, "I'm going to win eventually. I'm going to hang with the leaders a little bit further every day." His whole mindset was totally different than all the Americans in that race.
Whatever happened to that cat?
I don't know. I never saw him again after that. He didn't make Boston or New York, but that, all of them, I mean, I've been around a lot of those African runners that they're running to buy their family a cow.
Right.
I mean, a little bit of prize money or whatever. So they're not going to say what I can or can't do. They're just running to win. And that's a very different place to come from.
Well, that goes back. I think the both feet in today. It's a probably more extreme version. Is they're running because that's what they've it's what they've grown up and part of the culture. And you just like him, I'm going to be as fast and good as I can today. And it obviously petered out. But when you were telling that story, it makes me think in my world. As we'll do some conditioning, we have conditioning in the off season, and we'll do some sprint work or whatever. The guy that drives me nuts is that guy that's dogging, finishing middle of the pack and whatever. And then you get down to that last sprint. Okay, now whoever wins this one, you get to finish. And then that guy, blows everybody away by 10 yards. Yeah, you're like, I wish you would. You're going to get to the point where you're going to develop the habit. Like, I'm going to give what I've got in the tank every single rep until I fade. So, yeah, that reminded me of those guys in practice. Absolutely. Well. It reminded me of the guys I wish they would be. That dude right there.
Giving it every time. So Indiana over to Arizona State, one of the best programs year in and year out in the country. Talk about that transition.
It was funny because I didn't know anybody, but back to like the Miami to the Indiana jump was based on the fact of my internal voice is at Miami when I was deciding on the Indiana thing was, all right, big boy, you've done it here. Let's go see if you can do it in the Big Ten, So we got it rolling there. We were the number 4 national seed, whatever, College World Series. Same thing happened again, because again, Indiana, I had a 9-year contract at Indiana at the time. Life was good. But it was like, okay, Arizona State, never been that part of the country, never been in the Pac-12, blue blood program, same thing. All right, big boy, if you're that good, go try it somewhere else. So that was really kind of the motivation for me. I always kind of like to push the limits for myself. I'm not all about being comfortable. That's how it happened. And again, it wasn't like an inside network. I think it was just done on what we were doing in Indiana. And, and I might as well segue a little bit. Like, that was the first time in my life when it didn't work. And I say it didn't work from their perspective. In my mind, we were doing everything. And it was going in some unfortunate circumstances, but that doesn't even bother me. I think what the highlight for me and what I really learned and took away from Arizona State, because we were doing some really good things. And, and I say that COVID took away an unbelievable team, which probably impacted, personally what happened to me. But all that said, when I think back to Arizona State, it highlights for me the value of people. In any organization, whether it be, again, your military piece, the businesses that people run, it's like the relationships that you have on a daily basis are oftentimes, I truly believe, going to either foster and facilitate success, failure, you know, and and I say that in recruiting. I mean, it all starts with, in our organization, the value of that everyday interaction, people. It didn't happen for me there. Like, and I felt, and that was kind of honestly the first time in my career where I'm like, this is just different. And again, not that it was, anybody, I wouldn't even say the fault. It just was not a relationship based interaction. And so that is what I took from, and, now again, back to Michigan, like, I'll never want to get away from that. I want, and even evaluating, and I don't know who watches the podcast. When people evaluate making career moves or whatever, you better be darn sure on the people that you're dealing with on a daily basis, because I think that's going to define your happiness or misery. So
yeah.
Anyway,
so didn't finish your contract at Arizona. And essentially they bought you out, and there you were. How did you deal with that? How did that feel?
It was interesting, but because, well, first I'll back up. The hiring was, hey, we feel our recruiting's gone down and we feel our culture's not good. And they were right. And so, back to the process, and I would use that word process and get blown up for it, which I always thought was, very ironic. But I felt good. We were tracking, doing the things that we were supposed to do. Again, I think the COVID circumstances outside of my control, so I didn't really sweat it too much. And then it's the first time in my life, honestly, where someone said, "Hey, we don't think you're good enough," which was interesting, but that's their perception. Because I remember getting up from the table and I said, "Hey, man, I get up from this table knowing we didn't fail. We've done everything. We just disagree." And shook the hand and thanked them for the opportunity. But when you have that, if you've ever been, I tell this to people, and even when I see someone, a colleague in the coaching profession, get fired or not renewed or whatever, I pick up the phone and call them to say, look, I've walked into your steps. I know what it feels like. You're going to be just fine coming out of the other side. And, but it was I don't want to say humble, because I didn't feel like we failed. I mean, I literally was very, very comfortable. And back to the relationship, I was so miserable in my daily interaction with the people that, that I reported to, that I didn't realize what a physical toll it was taking on me. And I know that's a little bit what we want to talk about. So I was really keen in, taking care of myself through that, and having my own releases through physical, exercise and trying to stay right that way. But I'd be lying to you if I said it still didn't kind of hit you. Sure. Just shock to the system,
Yeah.
But like anything, I mean, I think everything happens for a reason. And I learned a lot from that experience about not only others, but I learned a lot about myself. And again, I've had some friends that have recently gone through that within the last month in this profession. And I call, and like I said, I call them. I say, hey, man, I know you're struggling right now. It's tough to listen, but you're going to be fine. And I also think it makes you sharpen a little bit and really dig in and be resourceful on, okay, what's next? Let's go find something. What's next? So that's honestly how I handled it. It wasn't a woe is me and sit around and feel sorry for myself. And Jimmy, I never, back to probably way back when, I never defined myself as just a baseball coach.
Right.
So that's where I knew I was going to be fine. I jumped in and became a CEO of a company, and, I was having a blast. I didn't have to coach again. I love coaching again, but I didn't have to do it because, to me, I'd kind of diversified myself anyway.
Yeah.
And so anyway, sorry for the long answer.
It's a huge challenge that companies are having at bringing it back to the business side of when you talk about relationships. That's the biggest thing that I think I can speak for most soldiers that transition at retirement or have been in 8-10 years and get out, is they don't realize how much that team, those relationships, depending on one another, it really, how much it means until it's gone. Like, you don't feel that anymore. And then it's like, something's missing in my life. Like, I don't have those relationships. And like I would get up every morning just excited to go do PT and work out with dudes. I mean, we're going to go roll. We're going to go run. We're going to try to kill each other. And it's just a great feeling, that camaraderie, and then suddenly it's gone. And or you go to a business. Well, now even though to the same degree that didn't exist as it does on a sports team or a military team in business, but with remote work, those interactions
Right.
aren't there. To say it's just a job is an understatement.
Yeah.
Almost it's a
Yeah.
login. I tell people all the time, it's, you know, it isn't the conferences. I love going and speaking at these conferences. I make a good living doing it, but it isn't the keynote or the breakout sessions that are most important. It's the cocktail hour. It's the golf scramble. That's where the relationships get
Yep.
built. That's where people
Yep.
connect and say, "Hey, Trace, can I get your contact info? You know, I'd love to follow
Yep.
up," or whatever. That's gone.
Yep. Yep.
And it's vitally
Well,
important.
I think it's everything. You know, it's like I was out for a year and it was living that Zoom life and communicating via this and I'd be lying to you again if I didn't say I felt exactly what you're talking about. And I didn't realize how much I missed it until I got back in of just that. For me, it was a daily cadence. I mean, Jimmy, I found myself on Saturdays doing something, you know, whether it been with the family or whatever. And then the moment would hit me like, I've never done this in my life, you know, because I've been a baseball dude since 18 years old and your weekends are gone, you know. And so now that back in that rhythm, and again, I like that. It was nice. And here's the thing. I also understand why in education people take sabbaticals, really,
Yeah.
because it kind of gives you a kind of a reset and maybe a finer appreciation, whatever you want to call it. But I just made the commitment to myself and I dived back in. And I said this even with taking over the Michigan team last year. I said, I'm going to value the relationships with those players more. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
I'm not going to blow up when I maybe normally would or whatever. Like, I'm going to enjoy this. And so again, maybe some people would say the ASU thing's a negative. I don't think so. Like, I don't have any regrets taking that situation because it taught me something about myself that maybe I didn't already know. So,
and I saw a lot more pictures at your cabin up north of in North Arizona with a stogie in your mouth and a view. And so that, you know, that time, like you say, like a sabbatical, that time to kind of be introspective, to think about you, your life, where you're at, it's important.
Yeah. I mean, if you're not in touch, I just think back to me, it's about life balance. And one of my favorite sayings is, you know, I take my job seriously, but I don't take myself too seriously. Because I see these, you know, these dudes are in this profession and I make fun of them sometimes about how, you know, how tough they think they are, how cool they think they are. And I'm like, dude, you don't get it. Like, that stuff's going to pass at some point, and you know, you're going to be a grandparent. You're going to be all these things. Like, enjoy that too. Like, and if you're happy in those spaces, I can promise you're probably going to be a lot more productive than your workspace too.
Yeah. So how do you feel you do with balance in life, and how do you focus?
I think really well. I mean, you know, from a physical standpoint, and I talk with my friends about this who are in the business world that, you know, they travel and you've done, you know, you don't eat the best diet sometimes and whatever. The most simple way I say it, and I say this to people, is like, I'm going to get selfish for about an hour and a half a day. Now, my hour and a half fluctuates, but what I mean by that is, like, I'm going to the gym, I'm going to run, and I'm going to do that an hour and a half, and that's my time. But I'm not going to schedule a meeting during that. I'm not going to do whatever. Like, I'm going to do that because my thing that I say is, like, pay me now or pay me later. Meaning, you know, if I don't take care of my physical health right now, you know, what am I going to be at 65 or 70? Like, so I don't know. And it works well for me. And I feel better. I do I don't know, you run a ton of your bike. Like, I have some of my greatest thoughts when I'm running, you know.
Absolutely.
And so that's why I do it. And I'll come home and, you know, that's the physical part. But you know, the grandbaby, you know, I just saw the other day, doing a post-game press conference, and I had Maverick, you know, on my lap as I was doing, you know. But there are some coaches, I worked for a coach actually who didn't want kids around the office. Like, I don't understand it. Like, that's the greatest give back we can give, because we spend so much time with other people's families. So I want my coaches who have young families now, and me with my grandsons, I want them to be able to spend time, because we spend so much time with everybody else's kids.
Yeah.
Like, we need to spend time with our own. And if we're not, then Their wife at home is going to be unhappy. Well, then guess what that leads to? It's going to be non-productive at work. So I think these people, and I apologize if I'm killing some of you or speaking against some of the folks you deal with, but these people that brag about, working endless hours and taking no vacations or whatever, I don't admire that. And I'll regress a second. I remember and this is true, when I was sitting at Indiana, when we took the team to the College World Series in 2013, I vividly remember sitting at the press conference table, looking down at the other coaches who I admired so much. But in our profession, everybody brags about how many hours it was. I remember looking down at the table as one of the final 8 teams in the country still playing and literally thinking, my system works. And what that meant to me was, you don't have to be, a jerk. You don't have to be a psycho. You don't have to be a whatever to win. You can have life balance. And I know that's a little bit about what we're talking about, but I remember having that at that age, thinking about that.
Yeah. Well, I always tell business leaders, really ask yourself when you're alone sometime, does my style of leadership inspire or compel behavior? And I've seen guys that compel behavior that have been successful. Okay.
Right.
I don't want to work for them though. They don't
Right.
motivate me. I want someone that I don't want to let down. They inspire me to be a better version of me. That's whose team I want to be on.
Yeah. And I love every time I talk to you, I learn something, but that's so true, because people ask me, a family setting and recruiting, like, how do you motivate people, or how are you going to motivate my son? The parent will ask. I said, well, probably the same way that I want to be motivated. Back to, like, I want to be around people who inspire me, that bring out the best in me, not just heavy hand. So
I'll give you one more with that, because I get asked that all the time as well. They're like, hey, Jimmy, we want to bring you in and everything. And they're hee-hawing around. They're like, it's a lot of money and this, that, and the other. And they're asking all these questions. What they really want to ask is, we want to bring you in to motivate our company, but will it last? Like, when you walk away, when you leave, is it going to last at all? And I always look at them and tell them, no, but neither does a bath. I recommend you take one of those every day, right? And so I'm going to come in and inspire you. I'm going to motivate you. I'm going to give you some ways to maintain that and sustain it. But you got to get up every day wanting to. And that's what the role of a coach to sustain that, people a desire, inspire them to want to be better every day is vitally important. Tracy, I've hit on most of these other questions, I think, here, but I do want to get down. What are you most proud of? And then follow that with the legacy. When you do hang the spikes up and you walk off the field, how do you want people to remember Coach Smith?
You mean the most proud of in terms of profession, or just
you name it? What really do you look back and say, man, that was a great accomplishment for me?
It's probably ties everything to kind of what we're saying. Because I look at a lot of young coaches now that they want to get in, and it's this they want to reach this pinnacle of coaching, which is great. But I go back to, like, how I started. I never really thought I wanted to be a coach. I just was doing it because it was fun and I loved it. And I work really hard, but I don't feel like I've worked a day in my life. But now that I am a little bit older and I'm at my 4th institution, and you kind of take stock at all the first round draft picks. I've had the 1-1, played in the College World Series, everything. And it's like, you know what, man, you've had a pretty darn good career in this thing. I mean, so I'm really proud of, honestly, the totality of building, because that's what I'm proud of, is just building, going into a program and building. Some have different starting spots, but I think just that, hey, man, you've had a really good ride. I've been doing this for over 30 years in a profession that's hard to stick around because it is results oriented. But I'm just proud that I'm still here and energetic and doing it with the same enthusiasm, honestly, that I did it when I was the head coach at age 30. I know that's kind of a broad answer.
I think that's great. And you should be justifiably proud of that. Now, how do you want to be remembered? What's the legacy?
Probably a little bit about what I said earlier about, hey, man, I really, that guy, he took his job seriously, but he didn't take himself too seriously. And so that if someone would say, and I get this, I don't like, I say this with humility, like, but a lot of times people will be talking to me and then they'll be into the conversation like, man, you're just down to earth. And I'm like, well, yeah, I mean, so I like that. Well, you're the head coach of whatever. I would think you would be X, Y. I'm like, no, I'm a small town dude from Kentland, Indiana. It's been pretty fortunate and lucky in his life. So I hope I don't stray too far from that. But I don't think my legacy, what I hope isn't going to be the coaching piece. Like I want to use whenever that ends. I want to use that platform at whatever level that is to actually make this game better. And the game of baseball, and provide opportunities for kids that maybe wouldn't have the chance to do that. And so and so my legacy, I hope is going to be the next phase of my life, in a much broader sense of just making this game of baseball across the country, maybe even the world, better and more accessible for everyone. So
that's awesome. Well, Tracy, I can't thank you enough for taking the time to spend with me today talking. It's been great just catching up, whether those listening got a lot out of it or not. It was good catching up with you. I could say, you and I hit it off from the beginning and have become great friends. And I think a lot of it goes back to that. I'm the same way. It's, nothing is more rewarding than to get those emails asking for advice of people that was on my team 10 years ago, asking for some career advice, or they value my input. I think, well, maybe I did make a difference. Maybe they did, respect me and being on the team and care what I think. And that's very rewarding.
Dude, you can remove the word maybe. You actually did it. So,
well, I appreciate you coming on, and best of luck at Michigan next year. It's a good thing you're not the head football coach and we're talking football, because my Bulldogs,
Here we go.
Anyway, good talking to you, Trace. Take care.
You too. Thanks, Rat. This was awesome. Thank you.
You bet.
Dark roads and a hero passes by, another one's gone to the other side.